Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Why Your Next Medical Device Enclosure Should Be Pressure Formed with Medical Design and Outsourcing and Ray Products Company. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets. If you have any questions during the webcast, please use the Q&A widget. We will capture all questions and have a special Q&A presentation following this webinar. And if we don't get to your question, we can answer it via email. A copy of today's slide deck will be available in the resource list widget, which is the green folder at the bottom of your screen. You can expand your slide area by clicking on the maximize icon on the top right of the slide or by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide area. An on-demand version of this webcast will be available approximately one day after and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. I'm Heather Thompson, Senior Editor of Medical Design and Outsourcing. Today we're speaking with Brian Ray, President of Ray Products, and Jason Middleton, who serves as Vice President for Sales and Development at Ray. And we'll be talking about the pressure forming process, why it suits MedTech so well. We'll also cover some of the deeper engineering questions such as design, tooling, material selection, trimming, finishing, and assembly. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brian and Jason.
Thanks, Heather, for the introduction. So what's possible with pressure forming? These are items that we're going to discuss in today's webinar, and hopefully you'll gain more perspective on how to design medical devices using pressure forming. So this is possible. Urethane conversions, highly cosmetic parts, tight tolerance parts, multi-part assemblies, three-color paint. One of the things that we did with this particular unit is we worked with our third-party design firm to convert this from urethane. A couple of the items that our customer wanted us to look at regarding the conversion was eliminate warping that was being caused by the urethane process. They had somewhere between 40 bosses just under the top lid, all there for controlling the warpage that they were seeing on that top part. The couple other items were parts were being shipped as a completed set due to inconsistencies from part to part. They wanted to eliminate the need to package one item or one set that they could only utilize and not be able to switch parts out. That's one luxury that pressure forming has. You can take any panel out of a box and put it onto the frame without the worry of it not fitting. This particular unit consisted of 5 pressure form parts, and we were able to decrease the total cost per part by over 50%.
So is this. Tight timelines, large molded in color enclosures, deep drawn parts, undercuts, and pressure form parts mating with multiple processes. On this slide you're seeing a cart that has a large pressure form part with undercuts along the perimeter of the part and sidewall undercuts. The part's molded in color, it's got an acid etch texture, and it mates up with blow molded parts, injection molded parts, and sheet metal parts. The production of this unit had to take place in amount of weeks rather than months, so tooling up and getting into production on a tight timeline was critical. And this, high gloss, smooth finish, metallic paint, molded in vent details, interlocking attachment points. These are all possible with pressure forming. And this, and this, and this. If you go left to right on the attached photos, you can see that pressure forming can solve many of your enclosure issues, from large parts to significant vented in detail, attachment points, multi-part assemblies, tall parts, small parts, wide parts, parts that have bonded on polycarbonate, parts that have EMI RFI shielding, and parts that attach to sheet metal frames.
Why pressure form medical devices? The following are advantages of pressure form medical devices. Cost at quantity. So low hundreds to thousands is typical for a pressure form product. The ability to mold in texture and color. So we use Mold-Tec, acid etch, just like your injection molders are going to use. Colors, we can utilize metallics. We can mold in any PMS color number that you provide. The ability to mold complex shapes. One of the nice things about pressure forming is that you're not going to see post-mold items that you would commonly see from other thermoplastic processes like injection molding. We're not going to have knit lines. You're not going to see sink. Lower tooling costs versus other plastic processes. We're going to be typically 20 to 30% of the cost of an injection mold, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes even less than that. Flexible part modifications with no impact to tooling. Unlike injection molding or rim, those tools when they need, or those parts when you need to have a item changed, say you want to move a Boss 50 thousandths, that tool has to get changed. Say you want to open up a vent detail, that tool has to get changed. Those are secondary processes in pressure forming that can all be done on the fly, which is going to help get your product to market quicker. Design, doing the impossible with pressure forming. So you're going to see on the following slide, there's a video that we have of a medical cart that Ray Products actually designed. We designed this part to have it be a multi-part assembly, top, base, side panels, drawers, and we incorporated everything that's possible with pressure forming. So undercuts, lapping joints, all kinds of different design features to basically help engineers that we're working with to actually see a living product that they can emulate when they're trying to design a medical cart or a medical device. So this is something that we do share with engineers when we're helping develop a product line with them.
Draw ratios. There is a formula that lets you know the thickness of the plastic you need to start with for any given thermoform part. This is just an estimate, but if you do take the surface area of the part and you divide it by the footprint of the part, you'll come up with a draw ratio. Typically, a 3-to-1 draw ratio is, right in the middle. 5-to-1, a little more complex. Can you go more than that? Absolutely. But it's all based on material, finished part design, and finished part requirements.
Sharp angles. Sharp angles can result in weaknesses. Can easily be solved with chamfers, and different materials can handle different sharpnesses of the corners. So you can see the pictures that we have in the top right corner. It's kind of giving you a little bit of an idea of the radiuses that are going to need it on depth of draw of that part. So if you look at example A, that depth of part is anywhere between 0 to 3 inches. It's going to give you that minimum quarter radius that we're looking for. Same thing with B, depth of part 3 to 6, and C, 6 to 12. So you can take this and utilize this when you're designing the part to give you some estimates on what we're looking for the radiuses and sharpening.
Undercuts are one of my favorite topics. They provide a lot of benefits in the pressure forming process. They allow you to increase strength and rigidity. They allow for fastening points. You can hide your trimmed edges. On the pictures below, if you run an undercut to the inside of the part and you trim the part from the inside surface, now all your trim takes place on a non-visible surface. Undercuts do require special tooling. Typically, you're going to actuate the section to allow the material to move. That section of the tool would be removed and allow the part to basically eject from the mold. Even with this, it's significantly cheaper than injection molding, and the value of an undercut and the benefits it provides should be seriously considered.
Draft angles. Draft angles are always a fun conversation with engineering. Engineering wants 0, the manufacturer wants 5. We typically end up somewhere in the middle. So below is going to give you a kind of an industry standard, what we're looking for on draft angle. So pressure form tools, typically 1.5 to 2 degree for your draft. Male tools are going to be 4 to 6 degree for your draft. One of the things that we are able to accomplish in pressure forming tools, we can go zero, even negative draft. Typically this is going to be done by actuating that wall or that side. The other thing is tool texturing. So this is a conversation that comes up quite frequently because we're molding in color and texturing the tool itself. That tool texture is going to dictate what draft. Most people have seen or heard of Moldtec. Moldtec's going to give you a requirement on that draft. If that requirement's not followed, just like in injection molding, you can see marks that might pull from the drag, or when that part's ejecting from the tool if you don't give significant draft. Again, we can go to zero or negative by pulling that wall, and that actuating slide can also be textured. So that's it for draft angles.
Doing the impossible with pressure forming, specific to tooling. When it comes to pressure forming, especially for medical devices, you want temperature-controlled aluminum tooling. You want a tool that's precise and it's repeatable. As mentioned earlier, you want the ability to take a molded part out of a box, put it on your instrument, and you want to be able to do that for the future. First part, thousandth part should be interchangeable, and you accomplish that with aluminum temperature-controlled tooling. You also get faster and more consistent production time. So being able to run parts efficiently in a volume setting is what you need this tooling for. It allows you to run engineered resins and other materials with tight processing times. If you're looking for things like polycarbonate, or you're looking for high-impact materials, polycarbonate ABS, low smoke, low tox materials that have tighter forming windows, your tooling is going to help you maintain a part that is repeatable, part-to-part, run-to-run. We always say that tooling is the foundation of a successful program. It's the first thing we start working on, but it's going to continue to drive your production for years to come.
Tooling automation. So we've talked about undercuts and negative drafts a few times during this presentation. It's probably the number one item discussed when we're speaking with engineers and the knowledge of what a pressure form tool can achieve. So being able to run an undercut is going to give you different options of how you can attach parts, the part-to-part, spacing, running reveal lines, molding in, angles on vent details, all things that can be done in a pressure form tool. Basically, we're building a cavity of an injection mold that can include actuating slides.
The pictures below show various molds and actuation being automated. So we're basically lifting undercut sections of molds to show how we would move a section and allow the molded part to come out of the tool surface. So tooling automation is critical. It needs to be repeatable. And as you can see in the pictures below, it's something that we do often. Take a look at the next slide. It'll have a video showing an automated tool being pressure formed on a rotary machine, and you'll see that the sidewalls of the tool will actuate as the mold and the material are coming together.
Molded in textures. So texturing in the tool is going to be created by acid etching a pattern into the surface of the tool. We're able to create different textures in different areas of that part. So if you need to apply a label to your molded and textured part, we're able to keep that area smooth so we can get nice adhesion on that decal or that label. 1.5 to 2 degrees of draft per thousandth and texture depth is recommended on your sidewalls. This was discussed a little bit earlier, but Moldtec and other texture companies are going to have specific degrees that they want per the texture that's chosen by the customer. Texture depth can be reduced in specific areas or texture pattern can be modified in areas with minimal draft or where a part may shrink toward the tool. So what we're able to do is, if you picked, let's say, a Moldtec 11, 10, and there's other areas that you want 11-030, this can all be achieved, and then we can work on blending in those textures so we don't see such a change. Part design, size, material, these are all items that need to be considered when we're evaluating mold textures.
Combining multiple parts in a single mold is possible in the pressure forming process. One of the advantages is it allows you to cut your total material costs. For instance, if you're able to mold a front panel and a rear panel, or a right side and a left side panel on the same tool and create a family mold, it allows you to reduce the total sheet size that's required to mold both of those parts. Typically, when we set up a family tool, you want to have similar shaped parts. You don't want to have a part that's 10 inches deep on one side right next to a part that's 2 inches deep. You want to have parts that are very similar. So tool layout is very important. Also, it allows you to cut that overall tooling cost. Rather than making two separate tools, if you're able to make one mold with 2 parts on it, or 3 parts, it's less expensive than making 3 individual molds. It also allows you to increase your overall manufacturing speed. So allowing you to mold 2 or 3 parts in the cycle time of one part is a lot more efficient than running 3 separate tools with 3 separate cycle times. But again, part shape will dictate how that mold layout is done. Material selection is also very important in pressure forming. As you can see on the left side of this slide, the materials available are any thermoplastic material. ABS, polycarbonate ABS, PVC ABS, PVC acrylic. It runs the gamut with what's available. So keep in mind that your material choices are pretty wide open, and let's let the finished part requirements drive that material conversation. When it comes to material characteristics, we have solutions for fire retardant materials, V1, V0, V2, 5V. We have heat resistant materials, chemical resistant materials, UV resistant. We have FDA food safe materials. Obviously, the majority of these materials are available in custom colors, including metallics. Custom textures are also available on the sheet. We do have RoHS and REACH compliant materials, and there's also low smoke and low toxicity materials that are available as well. Again, your finished part requirements should drive that raw material selection, and as we mentioned earlier, raw material selection does have an impact on your tool design and layout.
So tolerances, another question that we get asked by engineering quite often. So below we're going to see kind of a standard of different tolerances for the parts. One of the advantages that Ray Products has is the 6-axis robotic trim centers. This is going to actually allow us to have tighter tolerances than traditional industry standards. Also gives us less setups for fixtures. Having a 6-axis robotic trim center is going to allow us to build one trim fixture and trim locations that you would typically have to build and change out a fixture location if you're running a traditional 3- or 4-axis trim center. So we can kind of walk through some of these tolerances. 4 measurements, those are going to be tool-sided surface, plus or minus 20,000, additional thousandths per inch beyond 12 inches. Bonded in bosses, plus or minus 10 thousandths. That's going to be your center-to-center location for your insert. Your drilled hole diameters, slots, robotic trimming are all going to be somewhere in the realm of 10 thousandths to 20 thousandths. Those slots, robotic trimming can go down. Our robotic trim center can handle plus or minus 5 thousandths. Obviously, we would need to slow down the trimming process and look at building fixtures that are capable of holding that tolerance. But we do have the capability of running down to a plus or minus 5 on the robotic trim center.
Secondary processes in doing the impossible. Obviously, we can bond in bosses and blocks. These can be custom machine shapes. You can use standard rod and make bosses and thermally install. The brass insert, blocks, the same thing. But they can also be machined out of engineered resins, and they can be any shape we need them to be. Sheet metal, you can bond in a lot of sheet metal into pressure form parts. This is done a lot for venting and grills. There's some shielding opportunities to take advantage of with sheet metal. We can use trimming, obviously, to help us with some of our secondary processes by machining in tabs and interlocking features. The part on the right-hand side of this slide has a nice combination of complex machine blocks and also some tab features that allow for an interlocking feature with a mating part. The nice thing about these secondary processes is they're done quickly and they're done efficiently. Bonding fixtures can be changed rapidly. Trim can be changed rapidly. The fixtures required can be changed rapidly. So these are things that can all happen very fast when it comes to secondary processes. Doing the impossible with pressure forming is definitely helped out with robotic trimming. Advantages and opportunities with robotic trimming. Obviously, they're precise. As mentioned earlier on the tolerance page, plus or minus 5 thousandths. These robots are very accurate and they're extremely fast. They're cost effective. They are so accurate and so fast, they allow us to trim parts faster than most other thermoformers. The repeatability is exceptional. Part to part, run to run, the exact same part. Quite honestly, the robots are so accurate, they force you to be a better molder. Our parts have to be molded extremely accurate, so when the robots start to trim them, those walls and that material is where it needs to be so that robot can do its job. They're 6-axis. As you can see on the attached picture, there's a robotic arm. There's also a table, and that table rotation is 360 degrees. This allows for non-planar fixturing. We don't have to always fixture our parts in the horizontal plane. We can do fixturing that is non-horizontal, allow us to get to complex or difficult areas on a part so that we don't have to load and unload to various trim fixtures. Trimmed or molded in features. How about both? Take a look at the part below. We've got some molded in features that are trimmed out. What makes these molded in features unique is their pockets. We come in from the back surface of the part and we machine them away. So we have a nice formed in feature from the outside surface of the part. We come in very quickly on the inside of the part, open up those pockets. You have a nice clean surface from the outside. You have a nice clean surface machine on the inside. When it comes to holes, grills, all those features can be done very quickly, very accurately, and very clean on a pressure formed part. We can also go in and machine away specific areas of a part. If you have an area that has to be a specific thickness, we can come in and spot face that wall and make that thickness whatever you require it to be. Tabs and receiving slots, no problem. We can come in and machine areas and allow the pressure formed part to interlock or to attach to another pressure formed part, attach to a frame, attach to an injection molded part. A lot of flexibility there. Design considerations are pretty much wide open when it comes to trimmed in features. So take advantage of the robotic technology, have a conversation with us, let us know what you're trying to accomplish. Attached fasteners are another opportunity. They allow flexibility when it comes to putting multiple parts together, but they can also add costs. The nice thing is they can be as custom as you want them to be. The photo on the right shows a ball stud and a tenorment clip coming together. So typically you would put an insert in a boss, bond it to the inside of a pressure formed part, put a ball stud on it, put the receiver or the clip in the sheet metal frame, and push those parts together. It's cost effective, it's efficient, and it's very accurate. The issue typically is that the cost adder is something that people aren't used to seeing. But if done correctly and spaced out properly, the additional cost for the blind fastener or the hidden fastener typically isn't an issue. Most devices require a tool to access the internal components. So something to consider is how to put these features into your part. So let us help you with our vast experience. Let us make some suggestions and recommendations for fasteners and attachments and where to put them on your part. We can also mold in features to help with attachment. So we can do tabs and receiving slots as discussed earlier. Typically, a little more planning is required, a better understanding of the order of assembly. So does the top panel go on before the side panels, or does the rear panel go on first and then the side panels? So getting an understanding of how your instrument is going to be assembled and how it's going to be serviced in the field will help us guide you with some suggestions on how to mold in some features to allow for a cost-effective way to put multiple parts together.
Finishing. There's a lot of options when it comes to finishing a pressure form part. We've discussed most of them, molded in color, molded in texture. We can paint. All of this is going to be done in-house. It includes anything from high gloss to metallics to any PMS color you're looking for. So paint or don't paint your part. So this is a conversation that comes up quite frequently. One of the things that we do as a company, especially on a pressure form part, is we go in at the beginning of that project and our goal is to not paint. We want to mold in color and texture that tool. If we need to paint, so be it. We have an in-house paint facility. That paint facility is enclosed, temperature controlled, which allows us to get any Class A finish surface that our customers are looking for. It's going to include high gloss, metallics, matte finishes, any paint color that you're looking at. Same thing with molded in color. Molded in color, we're going to be able to do metallics, any PMS color that you're looking for. We're going to require a paint chip or a PMS number. We're going to match that and have that approved by the customer. EMI RFI shielding, that's another thing that's commonly done. We're going to utilize an ohm reader to test that the shielding has been applied properly, and then we also test as applied for thickness. Silk screening is done in-house. That's not an issue. It's something that we do on the majority of our medical devices. And again, kind of talk about textures, Moldtec textures, any texture requirement that Moldtec will be able to achieve on the tool is something that we can process. So to sum up the webinar today, what makes pressure forming perfect for medical device enclosures? Cost at quantity, low hundreds to thousands. Aesthetics, Class A surface finishes. We're able to achieve any Class A surface finish, whether that's molded in, textured, or painted surface. Precision, so we've gone over tight tolerances. With Ray products utilizing 6-axis robotic trim centers, we're able to hold tighter tolerances than most other thermoformers. Design flexibility. One of the nice things about pressure forming is we very rarely ever see the need for a tool and rework. This is going to save you money and time to market. Durability. Thermoplastic materials that have a high impact. Material options. Almost any thermoplastic material can be utilized in the thermoforming process. Flexible assembly options, so molded in features that include undercuts, snap fit, different tongue and groove type features can all be designed for your flexible assembly. Molded in color or custom finishes, again, something that we can do whether it's a color that's applied to the part by paint or molded in color that we utilize from the supplier.
Thank you, Brian and Jason. That was very informative. I just want to remind everybody that as we come to the end of this webinar, it will be available on www.medicaldeviceoutsourcing.com. And now we'll turn it over to the Q&A portion. If you have any questions, please use the widget below to ask. If we don't get to all your questions, our speakers will follow up with you. So let's get started. Our first question is, what are the ideal annual production quantities for pressure-formed medical device enclosures?
So typically we're going to see for the medical device industry somewhere in the realm of, you can start as low as 50, especially if you have if it's a startup company. But traditionally our customers are somewhere in the low hundreds, up to about 1,000 or so annually. And that's typical for multi-part assembly type products.
Great. And let's go into about fully robotic trimming. What does fully robotic trimming improve? Are you hoping for speed, accuracy, repeatability? Maybe you can expand on that.
We're looking for all of the above, right? The robotic trimming is going to obviously help with speed. It's going to trim parts extremely fast, which obviously makes you much more efficient. And it's really accurate. As we mentioned in one of the slides, it makes you a better molder because you have to basically put the material in specific areas so when that robot comes by to trim, that material is in the correct spot so that it can do its job basically. And then repeatability. The part-to-part repeatability is second to none. So first part, thousandth part, interchangeable, and the robots allow for that. So it basically improves all of them.
What are some of the competing processes that you replace? For example, is gas assist injection molding becoming a threat?
So typically what we're going to see for replacement or transitioning over from one process to pressure forming is either going to be sheet metal enclosures or urethane enclosures. A little bit of fiberglass. We don't see a lot of fiberglass in the medical industry. We see it in other industries, but traditionally for medical devices, it's going to be urethane, it's going to be sheet metal. I don't see gas assist becoming any type of a threat. That's typically a high volume. The tool's going to be, easily 50 to 70% more cost associated with it. So that gas assist and injection molding in general, the volumes are going to drive that conversation on whether it's a competing process. I will tell you, if you take a gas assist part and you set it against a pressure form part and you're looking at the cosmetic side, there's nobody that's going to be able to tell the difference. So we've actually mated pressure form parts with and up against injection molding parts on the exact same medical enclosure. So,
oh, that's good to know. You kind of already went over this, but let's be a little more clear. What are the ranges of thicknesses you can achieve? What's a typical wall thickness?
So typical wall thickness for medical enclosures, we starting gauge of that material is anywhere between 187 and 1/4 inch. That's pretty standard. The process and what we're capable of doing is starting from 60 thousandths up to 1/2 inch. So we have a nice big range of that material thickness, which allows us to do larger parts, deep draw parts with that thick gauge material. So it's really the range is there. I mean, I don't think we've ever come across a material conversation on thickness that we can't handle, unless it's thin gauge, which is typically going to be below 60 thousandths.
That's perfect. Well, speaking of, what kind of price points are you looking for in fasteners, and maybe what are some of the trade-offs in price?
So fasteners it kind of runs the gamut, right? But when you take a boss or a block and you're bonding it to the inside surface of a part, the trade-off is that boss or block has a cost, and there's also the cost of the adhesive to put it to the part and the labor to install it. But a lot of times that far outweighs some of the other traditional ways. But we do have some creative ways with tabs and receiving slots to eliminate bosses and blocks and allow for creative ways to attach by using molded-in features or secondary trim to eliminate these bosses and inserts and clips and things like that. But it is worth noting that UL does have a requirement that you need a tool to access a medical device. So it is something we want to have a conversation about, making sure that there is at least one mechanical fastener or an access point to the device, even if we do use all these great ideas of tabs and receiving slots and things that have no cost.
Gotcha. When should you opt to use injection molding instead of pressure forming?
we can both kind of go over. I mean, typically on again, injection molding versus pressure form, the first conversation is typically going to be volume. That volume conversation is what's going to drive a lot of the process, whether you're going to design, 5 parts and 3D print them, or you're going to do soft tool and make 25 parts in urethane, or you're going to go into sheet metal and make 50 parts in sheet metal, and then, you're going to go into pressure form and look at, 100 to 1,000, and then go in injection molding when you're hitting those high 1,000 marks. Also size. There's a reason why your traditional MRI machines, X-ray machines, those large parts are going to be done in the pressure form or vacuum form process. The volumes don't drive the tool cost and the ROI that the OEM is going to receive off of that tool cost. So traditionally, if the part is under, let's say, 10 inches by 10 inches and you're only making one of those and you need a couple thousand, you're going to go injection molding. If you're looking at a multi-part assembly that's going to be, your range of parts are going to be somewhere in the, 14 to 20 inch and obviously a lot larger than that, and you have 5 or 6 or 10 parts that are coming together, and you're going to make a couple hundred of those a year, there's no reason why you wouldn't go into the pressure forming process.
Gotcha. Can you elaborate on EMI and RF shielding solutions?
So EMI RFI is a spray-on application that we do in-house. Typically, when we're converting from, sheet metal or other processes, we need to offer that service so that the inside of a plastic part or a pressure form part can receive this copper-based product. So it'll have properties similar to metal. We're one of the few companies that measures the EMI RFI shielding as applied. So after we spray the material on the inside of a pressure form part, we'll go back with ultrasonic and measure and report on the thickness as applied. We also use Ohms reader to verify that the shielding applied meets the specification. So shielding is a big part of the medical device business, and it's a big part of what we apply to the inside of a lot of our covers.
Are there minimum sizes that you can achieve, and what do you recommend?
So I think like Jason said earlier, 10 inches by 10 inches is probably as small as you want to go. When I started in this business 20 years ago, we used to say, smaller than a bread box would go injection molding. Anything larger, we would take care of. But, we really get competitive at that 14-inch by whatever dimension. And obviously, the larger the part, the more competitive the process. And I think a lot of it depends on the design and the shape of the part, and whether it's a singular standalone part or if it's a part that is part of a larger assembly. For instance, we make some parts that are smaller than 10 by 10 because they go onto a piece of lab automation equipment where we make 12 enclosures. So we make 12 enclosures for a large desktop machine, and out of those enclosures, 2 or 3 of them are 6 inches by 8 inches. But they make sense because we mold them as family tools like we talked about on our earlier slide. So it's hard to say, what part size, but if you were to say standalone, I have an 8-inch by 8-inch part, I want a couple hundred of a year and that's all I want, then we're probably not the right process. But if you have a piece of instrumentation and several of the panels are pressure formed and you have a couple that are smaller, it makes sense to have the conversation because we can do some things in the tooling process and the trimming process to accommodate that.
Do you have data on your tooling costs versus cast urethane, the Master Plus, the silicone mold?
Yeah, we do. We actually, that's a pretty, that's probably one of the larger transfer industries that we see. We do a lot of conversion from soft tool urethane into pressure forming. So, and to get what that tooling costs versus cast urethane, a lot of it's really going to be just based off of part complexity. So it's hard to say what that total cost is. I can only tell you that I've worked with companies that our tooling cost was equal to what they were paying for a master and silicone mold in the past. That's not every part, but it's not something that's uncommon that we would see a transfer, especially if you're looking to make more than, you know, master's going to give you 3 shots at 25 parts. So, you know, when you start adding up the times, the amount of molds that you have to remake with cast urethane, it will easily become an advantage in pressure forming and for the customers. And not only that, on the tooling side, it's also the part cost. Our part cost versus cast urethane is unbelievably less expensive. Obviously, if people are buying cast urethane, you know the amount of work that has to go into processing those parts to make them cosmetic and also dimensionally stable. So with our process, we're not doing that type of work. So, but it's definitely, if somebody wants to contact me direct, I can dig in a little bit deeper on the details.
That's great. And how would you handle some reinforcement ribs?
Good question. We typically don't have to have ribbing on the inside of our parts. A lot of times people have ribbing because they've looked at designing another process. Maybe those ribs are being used on the inside of an injection mold part, so it allows for material flow. Or maybe those ribs are on the inside of a rim part or a urethane part to prevent warpage or allow that part to maintain its shape. So we typically don't have those issues. We have rigidity through the inherent materials that we run. Also, we use undercuts and some things in the design to give us that rigidity. But if somebody has to have a rib detail on the inside of the part, we would basically produce that either by machining a block or a rib and bonding it into the part. We can also mold a separate piece that could be attached to the inside surface of the pressure form part. So there's several ways to do it, but we typically aren't mimicking the same rib requirements from other two-sided processes because we don't have the same challenges to move that material that they do.
Okay. We do have a couple more questions we're going to get to. There's more that are unanswered, but we're running a little bit short on time. So the next question, we'll just ask 2 more. Is there a size limit to pressure forming, the length, width, dimension?
At Ray Products, we can do a pressure form part that's 6 foot by 10 foot by about 42 inches deep. So that's a single sheet of material making a single part. We can vacuum form or thermal form up to 10 foot by 18 foot, but on the pressure form side, 6 foot by 10 foot by about 40 inches of depth.
Okay. And then our last one, does Ray Products offer complete design services? Do you include sheet metal framework design? And what deliverables do you expect from clients to start out?
So we partner up with a few third-party design firms. We don't do a full contract design in-house. We have built a medical cart and a desktop unit, all full in 3D CAD, that we use to give that information to engineers that we're working with so they can better understand the process. But if somebody came to us and wanted a full developed internal frame mechanical design, we would bring in our third-party company to work with us and the client regarding the needs and what's, the expectations of that particular unit.
Great. That is, we have so many more questions, but that's all the time we have. I want to say thank you to our attendees. Thank you so much, Brian Ray. Thank you, Jason Middleton. Thank you, Ray Products Company. This was so informative. Everyone, I hope you have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.